Hello there, I'm Nathalia Melo, your unfiltered fit BFF, mom of two turned CEO of a fitness empire. Someone who understands the struggles of trying to stay fit, sane, and sexy, all while juggling work, life, and motherhood. And this is the Unfiltered Fit Life podcast. Follow along wherever you're listening and join me weekly as I help busy working moms just like you simplify their fitness journey so they can lose weight, regain their confidence, and feel sexy AF. It's time to stop living in the what ifs and hiding from the cameras. It's time to regain control over your body, feel sexy naked, and wear a bikini confidently. People already see you as a super confident woman, but it's time for you to feel the same way too. Let's go. Hello there, fama. Welcome to another episode of the Unfiltered Fit Life podcast. I am Nathalia Melo, your host. And today's conversation was inspired by a question that my son asked me when we were in the car. Because I don't know about you, but my life has been consumed by the Olympics. Anybody else, like their schedule is kind of revolving around the things that they want to watch? Just me? Okay. But I am very invested in the Olympics. Politics aside, I don't really give a shit about what happened before, what happened during, because, whatever happens, I think that the athletes are there with their incredible stories. And I think that that's the part that gets me the most is listening to these stories, is listening to their challenges and learning more about the person and the obstacles. And the more I listen to these stories, the more I realize that there are so many things that we can take from these stories and apply to our own lives and fitness journey. And, if you're going to learn something from somebody, why not learn from these stories from the best in the world? And the conversation while I was taking my kids to summer camp, and I had Peacock in the background in my car. Peacock is the broadcaster of the Olympics, and you can watch everything at all times. I need 55 TVs to keep up with everything that I want to keep up, but I digress. And I was listening to it and kind of had it in the background as I'm taking the kids to the summer camp. And then my son asked me, Mama, why are you so obsessed with the Olympics? And I wanted to give him a real answer. I didn't want to just say, because it's an amazing event. Because I do think that there's so many lessons and stories from these incredible athletes who are the best in the world. And I told my son, I was like, because these people work very hard for many, many years to showcase their hard work and to be the best that they can be and to push through limits. And I think that we should celebrate that. There's so many incredible stories. And I start to tell him some of these stories and what we can learn from the different stories. And I looked in the review mirror and I could see him really paying attention. So, I thought that I would share with you lessons that I have taken from listening to these stories, the obstacles that a lot of these athletes have had to get to where they are now. And I think that we can all learn from these lessons and apply the fundamentals of what I'm going to be talking about in their fitness, in their lives, in everything. But before we talk about that, I want to say thank you very much to all of you who are leaving your incredible reviews on Apple Podcast as well as on Spotify. And Spotify, you cannot write a review, but you can rate the podcast. So if you're listening on Spotify, make sure that you, hit that 5-star review if you find that the content I'm putting out is helpful. And if you are listening to it on Apple Podcast, I would love for you to leave a review. Doesn't have to be anything super elaborate, although I wouldn't be big mad if you did it. But it really helps the podcast grow. It really helps it reach audiences and people who can benefit from the information that I'm sharing. So let's read the latest review that we have here. This is from Pumped Mom TX. Nathalia is super informative, straight shooter, and will tell you what you need to hear. This podcast will change the way you look at fitness and life. Pumped Mom Texas I assume it's Texas. Thank you so much for this review. And if you're listening, I would love for you to leave that review for me in the podcast. That's your way of paying me for hopefully helping you with the content that I'm putting out. Okay. So now let's talk about the 5 lessons that we can all take from the Olympics and the athletes there. And the first one is that your beginning does not dictate where you end up. And this applies to, if you come from a family that everybody is severely overweight. Oh, that is just my destiny because everybody in my family is overweight, so I'm going to be overweight too. Or if you come from a family that doesn't appreciate sports. Oh, nobody in my family is into sports or working out or taking care of their body and all of that. So that's just how I'm going to be. Or, nobody in my family has ever built wealth. So of course I'm going to be like them. This type of mindset is what is going to keep you stuck forever. And I think that a very good example of that is the Brazilian gymnast, Rebeca Andrade. In English, people call her Rebecca Andrade, but in Portuguese, it's Rebeca Andrade. She is the gymnast that won gold in the floor routine, and she beat Simone Biles, another incredible athlete. So, Rebecca, I don't know how many of you understand how bad favelas, which is like the slums in Brazil, I don't think most people understand how bad it actually is. Many places in the favelas, houses are built half with paper, other half is made with wood. It's just a whole bunch of things on top of each other. You might have some houses that are built like actual houses as we know, but a lot of it is almost like made with paper. These people do not have a lot of resources. And Rebecca comes from a favela in Brazil, and she's one of 8 children. And whenever she started with gymnastics, her family, her mom was a housekeeper. And I don't know if you guys know much, but in Brazil, housekeepers do not make a lot of money. Like it's very, very little money. It's not like in the US, for example, that you can have a decent living. I'm not saying that you're going to be a trillionaire, but in Brazil, it's like very, very little. And nothing ever talks about her dad. So her mom was a single mom with 8 kids. She was the only girl. And she almost had to stop going to gymnastics classes because her family, her mom, could not afford to pay the bus fare for her to go. So her brother got a bike, and her brother would take her by bike to practice every single day. And it was a 2-hour commute. And now she is an Olympic champion. So I think that this is a very good story to tell, because oftentimes so many people get so attached to their roots, in the sense of, oh, because everybody in my family does this way, then that's the outcome that I have to have. You can be the first person to change the trajectory of what is seen as the norm. It can always start with you. Your beginning does not dictate where you end up. You have the power to change that. So that's the first lesson. Lesson number 2. And this one is going to be very cliche, so bear with me here. But the truth is that age is just a number. We have an athlete competing at the Olympics as young as 11 years old. It's a skater. And then you have someone who is an equestrian who is 65 years old. So imagine if that 11-year-old had believed, oh, there is no way I'm ever going to go to the Olympics because I'm 11 years old, or that 65-year-old telling himself that, oh, there is no way that I'm ever going to compete at the Olympics again because I'm 65. And then, we even have a basketball player for Team USA who is 42 years old, Diana Taurasi. I think that's how you pronounce her name. And there she is. But I think that as a society, we're always letting our outcomes be defined by our age. Oh, I'm too old for that. It's my hormones. Oh, there is no way I can look X, Y, and Z, because I've had people as young as 28 years old tell me that they couldn't build the body of their dreams or lose weight or do whatever it is that they wanted to do to improve themselves because, oh, it's my hormones. Girl, at 28, it's not your hormones. Stop it. But there is such a big attachment to this number. I've seen women that look incredible at 6 years old, and I have seen women that maybe don't look as great at 20 and vice versa. So it might be a bit harder, for example, the 42-year-old who is playing in Team USA women's basketball might be a bit harder for her, might need to take a little bit longer to recover, but it doesn't mean that it's impossible, which then brings me to the third lesson that we can all learn from watching the Olympics, which is just because it's hard, it does not mean that it's impossible. And again, I don't even believe that I have to say this again, but I don't want to make this podcast episode political. It's not about politics. You're not going to get me talking about politics ever. FYI. Don't talk about it. Don't care to talk about it. Not involved in it. Absolutely hard pass. No. But whenever I was watching the gymnastics, I love gymnastics in the Olympics. That's why a lot of the examples that you see that I'm going to use are going to be related to gymnastics because I'm really a big fan. But whenever they were talking about the athletes from Ukraine, Kyiv is a war zone right now. Again, not political, stating a fact. It is a war zone. And these athletes, the commentator was telling the story how a lot of them would be training in the gym and there would be rockets outside, going outside, and then they had to take shelter and then they had to get back to training. How wild is that? Anybody, and same for some athletes from Palestine. I cannot imagine how hard it must be to show up for training every single day, like not knowing if one, you're even going to be able to make it there, or like the gym that you train is going to blow up. If your family and loved ones are going to be alive whenever they come home. There are so many variables that for these people, it would be so easy to just give up because it feels impossible. But yet there they are doing the best that they can with what they have been able to do. And there have been quite a few Olympic medals for these athletes. And I think that we can all learn something from the idea that just because it is hard, it does not mean that it is impossible. And this is something that we can apply to our lives, to our fitness journey, to our health, to our nutrition. Oh my goodness, it's so hard to wake up early and go to the gym. Well, toughen up, like tough life. Imagine waking up early and going to a gym with rockets blowing outside your window. That shit's hard. Waking up early is not. So I really think that it brings a lot of perspective as well. And I'm a big believer of gratitude and finding something to be grateful, even in the little things. And, we get to wake up early and do the things that we want to do. And listen, I know that, the whole practicing gratitude is a lot easier said than done. That's something that I have to remind myself sometimes too. And that's why I've been so inspired by these athletes, because I'm like, holy shit, if these people can do this and go out there and earn Olympic medals training in the middle of a war zone, like what is my excuse to not get my shit together when life is good compared to that? Life is very good. So that's lesson number 3, which then brings me to lesson number 4. Just because it's never been done before, it doesn't mean that it cannot be done at all. And what inspired me to talk about this, and I even did some research because I was curious, and I go down rabbit holes and it's an absolute mess. But Simone Biles has had 7 movements in gymnastics named after her. 7. She's done a whole bunch of things that a lot of people, like women cannot do that. And even whenever you look at the history of gymnastics, I'm on this website here, which is called the United States Olympic and Paralympic Museum. And it says that although gymnastics was introduced in the 1896 Olympic, gymnastics competitions were standardized years later in the 1928 Olympics. So let's go with 1928. So gymnastics has been around in the Olympics for almost 100 years. And I'm pretty sure that every time that somebody did a new movement for the past 100 years, there was always somebody else that was like, oh, that can't be done. But in 100 years, there is still evolution and there is still people who are doing things that they likely were told that they couldn't do. So what can we take from this? I'm pretty sure that oftentimes you tell your friends that you want to, lose weight. And instead of being met with support, people are like, oh, but nobody has done it after having kids. Oh, here's a good example. I want to have a 6-pack after I have kids. Oh my goodness, because you can't do that. Even though it's even something that's been done before. But you always have the people who come to you and tell you that it can't be done just because they can do it. And the more we start to understand that outside comments talking about something not being possible to be done is more times than not a reflection of the person who is telling you than a reflection of your true abilities. The more we start to come to terms with that, the easier it becomes to let go and believe that you can do the hard things. That just because somebody else hasn't done it, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can do it. It just might be a projection from a person who has small dreams, which is fine. I ain't going to judge people that have small dreams. But just because they can do it, it does not mean that you can do it. Because whenever we look at gymnastics, it's been almost 100 years. And Simone Biles alone has had 7 new movements named after her, many of which people said, oh, it has never been done by a woman. And then she's like, very cute, hold my beer. So just because it has never been done before, it does not mean that it cannot be done at all. And then my 5th lesson from watching the Olympics, and this one I left for last because I'm so incredibly inspired by this one specifically, and I can identify with the experience, from winning the Olympia after getting second a couple times. 2010, I got second. 2011, I got second. And then eventually in 2012, I won. But the 5th and last lesson that we can all take from watching the Olympics is that to fall or to fail is inevitable. But what creates success is getting up and doing it again and again and again until you succeed. And I see so often someone starts their fitness journey and then, they have one quote unquote bad day. Oh, I ate something, so I'm just going to let it go, and becomes that all or nothing mentality. And then I'm going to start again on Monday, and then Monday becomes next month. And the next thing you know, it's kind of like, see, I messed up. And then you feel like it's not worth it to even start again. Because what's the point? I'm going to fail. And let's go back to the last Olympics. Okay. Last Olympics, it was 3 years ago because of the virus. So it was in 2021 in Tokyo. And Simone Biles literally had to bow out and not compete because of, she was having what's called the twisties. And apparently it's when you lose sight of where you're going to land. You don't have that vision. And she had to pull out of most of her events. And she got a lot of heat. People were absolutely chewing her up on social media, saying that she was X, Y, and Z and quitter, and that she let her team down. So although I don't think, me personally, especially after watching her documentary and things like that, it can be very dangerous to push forward and do the stuff that she does and experiencing the twisties. It can really be very, very dangerous. So I don't necessarily think that it's a fail, but it's definitely a fall, especially with the amount of expectation that was had of her. She had to wait 3 years. She showed up daily for hours and hours to train and wait 3 years to gain that success again and show more than anything, probably to herself, that she can do it. Meanwhile, whenever we put into perspective of our lives and our fitness, we have what is, quote unquote bad meal. I don't think that there are bad meals, but let's say that you eat something that is not on plan for you to accomplish your goals. And then you just kind of throws the hands up in the air. It's like, see, I already messed up. When you have the opportunity to start fresh again, the very next meal, this woman had to wait 3 years to probably prove to herself that she was worthy of that title. Even if she had accomplished a whole bunch of stuff, she still had to wait 3 years. And she showed up every single day, not knowing what the outcome was going to be whenever she did get to the Olympics again. If we trip and fail a little bit in our nutrition, or if we have a bad workout, or if we miss a workout or anything like that, we have the ability to prove to ourselves, just ourselves, because we do not have the whole world watching what we're going to do, ready to judge the shit out of what we do. Just for ourselves, we have the opportunity to do that the very next meal, the very next workout, the very next day. But more times than not, people choose to stay down and accept defeat when every hour, every minute is a new opportunity to prove to ourselves that we can be, in fact, successful in life, in fitness, in our nutrition, in our goals. A lot of times people have this bump on the road and quit. But the truth is that we have the choice to pick back fresh again and start the very next second. She waited 3 years, showing up for herself every single day. Many of the athletes, will be in swimming, they jump off the platform before the gun thingy. I don't know what's called. And sorry if you're into swimming, but I just find it fascinating. And they jump in the pool before everybody else. And then that's it. They're disqualified. And it's not for another 4 years that they can just prove to themselves that they can do it. They have to live for 4 years wondering, what if? Same thing goes for track and field. You get out of the block before that gun goes off, that's it. You're done. Out. Boom. Bye. See you later. See you in 4 years, boo. And that athlete has to keep on showing up every single day until the next Olympics, 4 years later, to redeem themselves. And us normal folks, we have that opportunity every hour, every second, every next meal. And yet we still choose to stay down. Why? And I'm going to do a little bonus one, which is going to be a 6, but it's a bonus one. So let's call it bonus. Because as you start to listen to a lot of these stories, I don't think I have listened to any interview from any athlete that athlete hasn't talked about all the sacrifices that they had to make, all the sacrifices that their families had to make, how many other things they missed out in doing or attending to be able to reach that level. And again, I'm not saying, if you want to be an Olympic athlete, please go for it. I support you. That's amazing. For the purpose of this conversation, we're not necessarily talking about becoming an Olympic athlete, but in the context of life, everything that you want to accomplish, it is going to have a little bit of a cost, because every yes that you say is a no that you're going to have to say to something else. And what I see a lot of times whenever it comes to fitness and eating according to your goals and things like that, people want to keep on doing what they did before. And on top of that, add the new habits that you're going to have to implement in their lives. And then they burn out. I'm telling you right now, you're not going to be able to eat in a restaurant and get fast food every single day because, quote unquote, that's just what you do, and expect to get the same result from someone who compromises. Instead of having, restaurant food 5-6 days a week, they compromise, they bring it down to 2 or 3, and then eventually to 1. So it's not that you cannot do X, Y, Z. It's not that you cannot have an ice cream. It's not that you cannot have a cookie. It's not that you cannot go to a girls' night out. But if you're wanting to, stay connected with your friends, and staying connected with your friends means getting white girl wasted every single weekend and then eating for a family of 25, you cannot expect the same outcome from someone who understood that they would have to take a step back from the things that didn't necessarily align with their goals. If your goal is to get white girl wasted with your friends and have Chick-fil-A at 3:00 in the morning after partying like a rock star, girl, you go for it. If you want to be having fast food with your kids every single day, I'm not going to stop you, but then you can't complain that you're not getting the results that you want, because every accomplishment in life is going to come at the cost of something. And this is something that I see a lot with moms, that they keep on trying to be everything for everybody. And then on top of being everything for everybody, they want to throw on top of that their fitness routine and prepping food and doing all of that. Like, they will burn out. So for example, for me, I'm not going to pack my weekend with 55 different activities and 25 birthday parties starting at 10 a.m. on a Saturday. I have a very clear rule. I don't go to birthday parties at 10 a.m. on a Saturday. Don't invite me. I'm not coming. Because it is important to me to, in order for me to show up as the best version of myself for my family, to have a moment of rest, to be able to train, or to be able to go to sports with my kids. Do I miss out on some events? Sure. I'm not saying all, but that's where the balance comes. You cannot expect to keep on doing everything that you did before and spread yourself paper thin and get the results that you want. You cannot expect to keep on eating the same shit that you ate before every single day and expect to, get the results that you want. It's just not going to happen. So understanding that every great accomplishment, just like for these incredible athletes at the Olympics, is going to come at the cost of something. And, whenever you start to understand that truly every yes that you say is a no that you're saying to something else, and you keep on saying yes to everything, you're ultimately saying no to you, to what is important to you. If taking care of your body and your health is something that is important to you, it's not for me to decide. But if you're complaining that you're always exhausted and that you don't have time to train and that you don't have time to rest, but yet you are making the choice to say yes to every single activity, every single invite that everybody throws at you every single weekend, it's a choice. These incredible athletes made the choice to be great. And they knew that was going to come at a cost. And again, I don't think anybody here is trying to go for the Olympics, but I do think that there are some incredible lessons that we can get from these athletes. In understanding that there is going to be a cost for you to accomplish your goals, coming to terms with that is incredibly important and liberating, really. So these are the 5 lessons that I got from watching the Olympics. If there is any other lesson that you have learned from watching the Olympics, please send me a message on social. My link is down in the show notes. I'd love to hear from you. I know that there are a lot of lessons that I could have added here, but for the sake of being concise, because I cannot be concise. So if I had 10 points there, we would be here for like hours, and I don't think you'd listen to me for hours. So let's try to keep this short and sweet. And one last thing, guys, I am going to be hosting my first ever credible event in Dallas, Texas on the weekend of September 28th and 29th. First day is going to be with speakers where we're going to be going over how to create a strategy that allows you to lose fat and accomplish your fitness goals in the simplest way possible. We're going to be talking about, from practical stuff on what is the best diet for you, working all the way up to how can you outsource? What is the best way to have work-life balance? Because that's one thing that we see a lot, that women struggle with, that work-life, mom guilt, all those things. So how can we overcome that? And this is what exactly we're going to be talking about at the Powerhouse Summit. Tickets are now on sale. You can click the link in the show notes. And right now we have the early bird pricing, and you get an extra 20% off for being an amazing listener to this podcast. And you can use the code EARLYBIRD20. The code's going to be in the show notes as well. The link's going to be there. This additional 20% off the ticket is only going to be available until August 23rd. Okay. So next week on the 23rd is the last day that you can use this additional 20% off. I would love to see you there. Lunch is going to be included both days. The venue is incredible. It is very, very intimate. Like, I picked that venue because it is so intimate. And, I really want to have that experience and connect with everybody, not only myself, but also our incredible speakers. So once the tickets are gone, they really are gone. So make sure that you grab those tickets for an additional 20% off with the Early Bird 20 code. And if you have any questions, please send me a message on Instagram and I'll be more than happy to answer them. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. But let me ask you, what was your aha moment in today's episode? I would love to know. You can leave me a comment or voice message at the link in the show description. You can also follow me on Instagram and let me know what topics you want to hear more about or who I should have on the show. As for today, this is it for today, guys. I'll see you back next week for another episode of the Unfiltered Fit Life podcast.